Hello world. I'm just going to start off today by saying just welcome back to YouTube to Andy Hall. Hasn't made a video for a couple of years now, but is back with a new series of videos. So I'll put a link to him in the description. He's also linked on my channel page as one of my featured people. Andy Hall, for people who don't know, is really famous for his absolutely seminal series on the various different pressings of Beatles albums. He's literally got hundreds and hundreds of copies of these albums, and they've all got slightly different label variations and everything else. And this is what has prompted me my question today. There's a wee bit of a backstory to it, okay? In 1962, the Beatles signed up with a subsidiary of EMI called Parlophone. And it was a particularly naff contract. Brian Epstein at the time, who was their manager, really didn't know very much about the music industry, could probably have got them a better contract, but you know, at that time it was beggars can't be choosers. And so what happened was that Parlophone released the Beatles records under this really naff contract that said, you know, you get about a penny per side of each single that's sold, and maybe a shilling per side of each album that's sold. And that therefore had to then be split between John, Paul, George and Ringo. John and Paul wrote most of the songs, so they would get a little bit more. George and Ringo basically got a flat performance fee that came out of this penny, so maybe, you know, a farthing each or something per side of record that was sold. It turned out not to matter, because the Beatles sold so many records and amassed so much money that, you know, really they didn't know where it came from, and they had very little concept of what money was about. But this idea of contracts and stuff like that, I want to come back to that in another video, because there are other sort of things that I want to explore about that, and questions that I want to ask. Okay, but basically up until 1967 all of the Beatles music was released on Parlophone. Okay, the NAF contract came up for renewal in 1967, but by that time their first manager Brian Epstein had sadly passed on. The Beatles were in a kind of a quandary, and their contract was also up for renewal. And so, you know, well, what do we do? And so the Beatles decided to start this record label called Apple, which would, you know, on the face of it, would offer a better deal for up and coming artists. It wouldn't subject artists to the same sort of humiliations that the Beatles themselves had suffered in the early 60s, trying to hawk their music around record companies and getting rejected. I think, you know, they made some sort of promo film or something where they had this sort of mock band, as it were, that had sort of done nothing up until then. They said, we want to make an album of conceptual art, and they would say, yeah, go ahead and do it. And yeah, they were taken for a ride about it. There were a few very successful artists that came out of it. James Taylor, for example, his first record was on Apple. And Mary Hopkin, obviously, Badfinger, Leon Russell. Who was the other guy? Billy Preston, the keyboardist, yeah, played on Let It Be as well. So they all came out of this Apple label, all right? So all the way up until Magical Mystery Tour in the UK, all of these records have been on Parlophone. Okay, now Magical Mystery Tour itself is a case in point, because in the UK it was released as a double EP, i.e. two 45 RPM 7-inch singles. They sweetened the pill of the fact that the Beatles didn't have very much music to go on this thing. They didn't write very much music towards the end of 1967, or at least very much usable music. So there were only like 6 songs or something to, you know, that were new to the film of Magical Mystery Tour. So EMI sweetened the pill by sort of releasing it in a double jacket and putting in a booklet with the lyrics and with the film plot and everything in it, and making it all kind of psychedelic and everything. All, I think, to kind of disguise the fact that the music itself, relative to what the Beatles had put out before, including, you know, all of 1967, we remember we'd had Sergeant Pepper, which was seminal. We'd had All You Need Is Love very, very quickly on the heels, which was, you know, became a huge anthem and everything. And then suddenly, you know, really, you know, their energy was like, you know, and so the songs for this thing, as well as the movie itself, which was crap, the songs by the Beatles standards were substandard, shall we put it that way, okay? Not as crap as the movie itself, which really flubbed when it was shown on Christmas Day in 1967. So, in 1976, Magical Mystery Tour was re-released in the UK as the American version. Now, in 1967, Capitol in America had decided, right, well, we're not going for EPs. EPs don't sell in America, all right? We need an album. So what they did was they bundled up a few previous singles and B-sides that hadn't been included on any album before and put them on side B. So that included Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane, Baby You're a Rich Man, All You Need Is Love, and a couple of others that I've forgotten off the top of my head. But yeah, so they made a full package out of it. This booklet and you know, this very lavish sleeve and everything was increased to the size of a 12-inch record, and a gatefold sleeve, and just looked fantastic and whatever. And the British people wanted it. So it was only really available as import copies from America in this country. And so in 1976, the Beatles, EMI Parlophone, eventually caved in and made a British release of the American format Magical Mystery Tour, and released it on the Parlophone label. That's really important, that it was 1976, and the music from that era was the Parlophone era. Okay, was on Parlophone. Now that format of everything from 1968 to 1970 being on Apple, but everything pre-1968 from 62 to 67 was on Parlophone. All right, that format is still in place today. So even if you bought the 2009 CD remasters, everything up until Magical Mystery Tour is on Parlophone. Everything post Magical Mystery Tour, i.e. the White Album, Yellow Submarine, and Abbey Road and Let It Be, those 4 albums are all on Apple. All right. In 1973, and this is where my question is coming in 1973, the famous Red and Blue albums have been released. Now, that they weren't really called the Red and Blue albums, they were called 1962 to 1966, and you'll see, here it is. This is absolutely iconic. You know, this, first of all, this is a picture, it's an outtake from the Please Please Me sleeve, as taken by Angus McBean. On the back, it's in 1969, they originally wanted to release an album called Get Back. It became Let It Be, but at the time they wanted to, you know, release this thing called Get Back, which was about, you know, let's be a rock and roll band again, let's go back to our roots kind of thing. So they went back to that same block of flats and had this picture taken, all right? Companion to that, they had 1967 to 1970, which obviously had the Get Back sleeve on the front and the Please Please Me on the back. All right. What's important about these is that in the UK, they were all released on Apple. This album here does not contain, because it only goes up to 1966, this album here does not contain a single song that was released on Apple. Okay, you can even go to something like the Beatles Past Masters, which was a CD compilation that was originally released in 1984 or something. No, a bit later than that, 1987, sorry. Beatles Past Masters, Volume 1, on Parlophone. Beatles Past Masters Volume 2, which includes most of this stuff, which would have been released on Apple, is also on Parlophone. So why are these on Apple and not Parlophone? Okay, this one here should, by rights, be on Parlophone. Apple Records, as it were, did not own the music for this. EMI owned the music to this. At least one side of this album, if not two, contains music that was originally released on Parlophone. So how come, again, it's on Apple? This one here happens to be an American copy that's on Capitol, so but the UK version, and that includes subsequent CD issues and reissues and stuff like that. They're all on Apple. Why? When, as I say, the label conventions themselves were, as I say, Parlophone up until 1967, Apple beyond that. Okay, and that convention, as I say, throughout the whole of the ensuing decades has stayed the same. Okay, it doesn't matter whatever reissue box set and whatever. In fact, like the Beatles mono box set that I've got here, it is adamant that we're keeping the same labels because it's historic interest. The Please Please Me in the mono box, it is a gold label, Please Please Me, which is, if you were to find an original gold label, would be incredibly rare indeed. And all of the ensuing albums retain the original Parlophone designs, and then when you get to the actually, I want to check something here. Got nothing to do with my question whatsoever, except that I want to find the Mono White album. Here it is. Right, this White album was the first album that was released on Apple. No, it wasn't. I lie. Yellow Submarine, I think, was the first album that was released on Apple. But this one here, original copies, forgot to include an EMI recording. Yeah, the reissues, the mono reissues, do actually include an EMI recording. It's just here. It's just up here on this sort of, on the left hand side of the label hole here. It does say an EMI recording. The very first White albums forgot to include an EMI recording on there, which obviously sent Joseph Lockwood, who is the chairman of EMI, into absolute ectoplasms of despair. But anyway, the question is simply, beg your pardon here, the question is simply, why are the 62 to 66 and 67 to 70 albums on Apple, even though most of the music was not released on Apple, it was released on Parlophone, and ensuing press runs and releases and stuff have always kept that format. But these two albums, for some reason, didn't. Someone might know. Tell me, please. Thanks. Bye-bye.